Stan was the overnight success. It took 20 years to get to the point of co-creating the Marvel universe with Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Larry Lieber, Don Heck, and so on. And we'll get to a lot of those people. That's a lot of people of my generation, people who were reading Marvel early. That might be the very first image we ever saw of Stan with the Frank Sinatra hat. And it was there on the inside cover of Fantasy Masterpieces #1, where Stan had a few words to say while introducing the stories in the comic. And you'll notice his hair or the things covering his head. You know, there's a website called The Many Hats of Bob Dylan, and I think with Stan you'll see a lot of different hair and hat configurations. Here's Stan in his army days when he was doing instruction manuals on how not to get venereal disease and other things like that. And here is in the height of the Marvel era in the 60s, he's being visited by the Princeton University Cliosophic Philosophic Society. And you can tell he doesn't know any more what they are than they do, but there's two brothers named the Chulenko brothers, their twins are in there, and that was sort of and then there's a famous bust of Stan's wife, Joan, in the background, which I think was destroyed years later in a fire, unfortunately. Here's Stan with sort of another hair configuration showing off an issue of Strange Tales. Looks like it's a Steranko Fury story. Here's sort of Stan evolving into celebrity Stan with his beard and in front of a bunch of 60s Marvels. This is one of the few, I only know of 3 photos of Stanley and Jack Kirby. This is done in 1966, I believe, at an NCS, a National Cartoon Society event in New York. Anybody, I don't know, does anybody know who those other 2 guys are? Okay, well, they're not important to this discussion. As if I had to tell you, Stan and Jack co-created the Fantastic Four, which launched the Marvel Universe. So if all you know is the movies and Stan's cameos, this is where it all, everything began here, and also began here with Spider-Man, co-created by Stan and Steve Ditko. And of course, we must not forget Ziggy Pig and Silly Seal, co-created by Stan, and Al Jaffe, who at age 98 is still doing the mad folding. So I'm going to just now take it over to our panel. I put these up. I didn't know what order anybody was sitting in, but since it's a picture of Michael, Uslan, and Stan, Michael, why don't you tell us some of your fondest memories of Stan? And also, I have an image of that Just Imagine project that you did in DC.
Oh, thank you, Danny. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for pointing out that back in the war days, Stan worked on venereal disease films.
He's adamantly against it.
Well, I'm pleased to announce to you all today we've acquired the rights to Stan's earliest creation, and we're going to be making the live-action movie Captain VD.
Will it be in 3D?
3D and 3D, welcome to Comic-Con. So I have to tell you quickly one of my favorite Stan stories. We were having lunch up in LA at Stan's favorite place, Nate Now's Deli, and it was just at the time Disney announced Ant-Man was going to be made into a movie. And we're there, and Stan turns to me and goes, "You know, Michael, I got to tell you, off the record, out of all the superheroes I've ever created, the only one that was a total failure to me that I could never figure out to make successful was Ant-Man." He said, "We started, it was me and my brother Larry and Jack Kirby, and we did this weird story, The Man in the Anthill." He said, "It didn't sell well, but it got a bunch of letters, so I thought, well, maybe there's something here." So we put him in a costume, and I called him Ant-Man. He said, "It didn't sell." So then I said, okay, he needs some sex appeal here. We made an Ant-Man and the Wasp. It didn't sell. He said, so then I thought, well, maybe fans don't like shrinking heroes, maybe they'll like growing heroes. He said, so I turned him into Giant Man. Didn't sell. We tried the new Giant Man. didn't sell. So I changed his name, I made him Goliath, and it didn't sell. He said, so then I figured, okay, I bet I have the wrong insect, so he made him Yellow Jacket, and it didn't sell. So finally Stan said, now Disney's going to spend $200 million to make it into a movie, maybe they'll figure out how to make it. And that was pure Stan. One thing I want to try to mention real quickly. I'm at the premiere of our first Batman movie in 1989. Every star in Hollywood is there. I could give a shit. I was with Stan Lee and Bob Kane. And the two of them were very friendly, and I'm in the middle of an argument between the two of them, a good-natured argument. And Stan says to Bob, you know, if I had written Batman, this thing could have been really successful. And Bob said, well, if I had drawn Spider-Man, I could have made a hit out of that. And I'm standing there going, wait a minute, Stan Lee version of Batman, I wonder what that could have been. Years later, at the right moment, I said, Stan, what if I was able to bring you to DC Comics and recreate Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Justice League the way you would have done them if they had been at Marvel? Is that something you'd be interested in? He says, Michael, it will never happen. That would be like bringing Henry Ford to General Motors to make cars, or the head of Coca-Cola taking the Pepsi challenge and losing. He says, DC would never go for it. So thank God, this wonderful, incredible visionary man, Paul Levitz, who was running DC, I was able to get a meeting with Paul. I said, what do you think of this? And he looked at me and said, this would be the most fun. And thanks to him, we were able to make that happen, and Stan went over to DC to do this series for a year. The first issue was Superman by John Buscema. It was John's final work. I was in Stan's office when the artwork came in. And Stan's looking at it, I'm going, this is beautiful, this is beautiful. He says, John is the best. Wait a minute. And then he looks at one page, he said, he did this all wrong. This Superman has got to be flying with his hands out like that. He goes, Michael, wait a minute. He takes John Buscema's original art, packs up tissue paper, outlines the panel borders, hands me a pen, and says, draw what I tell you to draw. Yeah, okay, I haven't drawn since first grade. So Stan's going, no, it's got to be like this. And Stan Lee climbs up on his furniture, has 1 foot on the couch, 1 foot on his end table, next to a lamp that's about to fall over, and goes, oh my God, it's got to be just like this. And I'm doing it, and Stan's on the furniture, and goes, holy shit, I am freaking Jack Kirby. This is unbelievable. And these were just 2 of my favorite moments with the guy who started as my idol, became my mentor, became my friend, someone I was able to work with creatively, whom I will never, ever, ever forget.
Michael has been a producer of all the Batman movies, and he's here celebrating the 30th anniversary of a little thing called Batman.
I think that's terrible.
Just a quick aside, Michael was talking about Bob having brought Stan as his date, if you will, to the Batman premiere, and I saw them both there. Kind of a prescient moment. Stan was jealous that Bob's wife had gotten a cameo in the Batman movie, and sort of, you know, if you put me in, I'd love to do a cameo in the Batman movies. All got enough cameos in the end.
Well, I have this image of you and Stan and Batman.
Yeah.
And also, Stan seemed fond of your DC Comix book.
He was kind enough to show up for the book party when we launched.
So
You're not doing a book that's 17 pounds about him, are you?
I am not, no.
He'd be really pissed at that.
Yeah, no, it's
Stan wanted the biggest and the best about whatever it is. So.
Well, Roy did that book. Roy did.
Yeah, but that isn't all about Stan, so that was...
Actually, there is.
The one that was 17 pounds? Okay.
Yes.
Then it was...
That's a $2,500 book. It's a little different market than mine. So what was Stan like, dealing with Stan when you were in the DC running stuff?
You know, when
running stuff at Marvel, any good?
We really got to have a relationship when I got more senior in the business. When I started out, I was over on the DC side, so I didn't have any natural way to work with him the way Marv did, for instance, early on in his career. But it was nice because even though there was an enormous age and experience difference, we kind of had more of peerish relationship because of that. So my favorite story to offer up. We're at Hamlet one night. I'd have dinner with him periodically when I was visiting LA, which was always a great pleasure. I made it to the second time this house before bringing along my bound volume of Avengers 1 to 16 for him to sign. Promised to be grown up at dinner, but first he was going to sign this for my inner 12-year-old. So we're out at dinner, and at that particular moment, Marvel is asking him to do more quote-unquote editorial work. Unclear what that actually was, and I don't think it actually ever happened. But Stan has the avatar off, which didn't happen very often, even in private conversation, even if you were just sitting with him in a restaurant. He was charming the waitress, you know, she'd be ready to climb into the takeout bag. He wasn't going to do anything, but just he excused his Stanness. But the avatar's off, and he's talking about this. He says, "So Paul, you know, I haven't been an editor in so long. What do editors do these days?" I said, "Well, you know, to all intents and purposes, Stan, I haven't been an editor as long as you have. It's been quite a while. Well, you know, the job of an editor is always to get the best possible work out of creative people." "Oh, you know, I wasn't much of an editor. I just wrote all the stuff myself." I started laughing at him. And I said, "Stan, I'm sorry. You know, I got to work with pretty much all the guys you worked with over those years. I mean, leave Stan and Steve aside, and you got better work out of them than anybody else did. But clearly they were geniuses. But I mean, I worked with Don Heck and Dick Ayers, wonderful, nice professional men, great storytellers. Nobody ever got anything the world really cared about out of them but you." And he started laughing. He started saying, "Dick, I remember Dick. He was doing some Western for me. And every time I would send him a script, he'd call up and he'd say, 'Okay, Chief, what do you want me to do with this one?' And the avatar flipped on without us even realizing it. And it was, 'Well, Dick, you know, it's a Western. I want to see the hoofs flashing, and I want to see the spurs shining,' and I'm just laughing my fucking head off. So, that's it, Stan. Dick would come in with me, and he'd take out his nice little book, and he'd say, 'All right, that 3 pages a day, I'll be back meeting the next script on, you know, June 7th, and I'd say, "Great, Dick, I'll have the next issue ready for you then." We had a great relationship because he trusted me to have the work ready. I never got him excited about anything. It showed in the work. And you were a cheerleader. No pom-poms, no short skirt, but, you know, you got him excited, and it showed in the work in a very different fashion.
Thank you, Paul.
The anonymous at the end of the table is Todd McFarlane, who was here. I'll get to you in a minute, but going down the random order I put the slides together. So Dennis, who's this guy?
First of all, that's Dazzling Denny. Like a lot of us, I grew up loving the Marvel Revolution, and I was a big fan. And when I self-published my first underground comic back in 1969, I sent it to Stan on a lark with a short letter, never expecting a reply. I got a very nice reply. I replied, he replied. Pretty soon we were steady pen pals, which was great fun. And then he started trying to recruit me to come to New York and work in the bullpen, which at a certain age I would have jumped at, but I was already building my own empire with the kitchen sink press and enjoying it. So I kept saying no to him until 1973, which in the underground business we call the crash of 73. I suddenly said to Stan, "You know, what about that job offer?" And I wasn't interested in editing superhero comics. I wanted to keep doing what I was doing. So he agreed to let me do an experimental magazine called Comix Book with an X. And so for this very first issue, one of my favorite anecdotes about Stan was I had assembled it. In those days, it was literally paste up. I was pasting up the title page. And the very last thing I needed was Stan's title. He had been putting it off and putting it off. And so I called him and I said, "Are you publisher? Are you the editor-in-chief? And he said, well, I've been thinking about this. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, put down that I'm the instigator, because he said, if this does really well and makes a lot of money, he says, I could say I instigated it, but he said, I don't exactly trust you and your crew, and you might get me in a lot of trouble, so I can just say, I only instigated that thing.
What was the origin of that drawing?
Pete Poplasky did that. We did a best of Comix Book through Dark Horse a few years ago. It was obviously relatively obscure compared to the superhero stuff, so if you're curious, I think it's an imprint from Dark Horse.
Thank you, Dennis. And now we move on to... Marv, here's apparently a high-level meeting you and Sal Buscema were having with Stan at some point a meeting you had with Stan Pages of Nova. So, and I also have a shot of you and George at the Stan tribute in LA. So what's your favorite Stan memory?
Oh, there's so many, because I worked with him, I was editor-in-chief when he was still in New York, so I got to work with him pretty much every day.
Also the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got to work with him pretty much every day, but the fun part is Stan is as outgoing in real life. I mean, you can close the door and nobody can be there, and he'll still be very positive. He's one of the most positive people I've ever seen. Some people are smirking. I'm talking about in the good way. He really is. So one day I walk into his office and he says, "Hi, Marv, how are you?" and I'm not outgoing in the slightest. I went, "Fine." He said, "No, you're not fine, you're great." And from that point on, every time he'd ask me, I'd just go, "I'm great." And he'd go, "Great." Stan, there was a time we were walking, he was talking about toupees or something. I don't know if he actually had one or not, but we were walking for lunch. And it's a very windy day in New York, and he has his hands like this as we're walking. And I made some sort of a comment about why he was doing that. I said, "If the wind gets any worse, you are going to have to chase it." There was another time, it was a Friday night at the Marv Wolfman, and people were going crazy as they always did, because that's what they do on a Friday night. And a whole bunch of people were fake wrestling. And somebody goes cascading out the front door, out the door into the wall, and is lying there as Stan is walking by. So people were wrestling, they collapse in front of Stan, he looks at that, he continues walking, steps over the corpse of the person, and says, "Keep it up, men!" and goes. It made working there fun. It made working there something you enjoyed, because the guy in charge loved it. He loved it, and he showed that, and he exuded the love that he had for what he was doing. I have only good memories of Stan and only good thoughts of Stan, and we worked together for 8 years, so he was a really good guy, and he honestly knew everything. I could go in, no matter what question I had, I could spend a week trying to figure out something, and I can go into his office, and he'd tell me how to fix it in 2 seconds. Amazing.
Thank you, Marv. Many years of the Comics Buyer's Guide. This is the cover of when Stan turned 75, and we thought that was old. You did a cover for that, and then also I think you're holding up some document relating to Stan there. I know you have a theory about Stan and celebrities.
Well,
whatever you'd like to talk about.
my daughter just turned up this winter, some old records that we had. So what I'm holding there is Newfangles, which was a newsletter that we sent out. My late husband and I did the first amateur magazine about comic art, and then Newfangles was a newsletter that we published every month to bring people up to date. And in this particular case, the rumor was that Stan had been fired for hiring his relatives and had gone to Charlton.
That was obligatory at Marvel.
And so we did How to Squash a Wild Rumor, and I called Marvel and and Stan answered the phone. And so we said that kind of explained it right there. And, so it was that relationship, but what my daughter turned up embarrassingly was, so we did this fanzine starting in 1961, and we sent it to Stan, and all these guys were kids, right? We were the grown-ups in the world of fandom. And so I, at age 20, wrote Stan, I am not kidding, a 6-page letter explaining what he was doing right and what he was doing wrong. And my daughter is laughing hysterically at my presumption. I'm sorry, Loki is not Odin's son. Loki, in case you didn't know. And Stan sent back a letter, and it was, it's so wonderful to have fans so enthusiastic that they will spend all this time writing to us to explain their feelings. And thank you so much for the Comic Art magazine. I'd be glad to answer any question you might have for me, as long as the answer is yes or no. Patient, funny, wonderful. The other thing I want to emphasize is I finally went back and did an analysis when Fantastic Four #1 came out that we had on the screen. It was 12 simultaneous comic books. There were 2 writers, Stan and his brother Larry. It was amazing, and most of them were anthologies, which meant multiple stories in the issue. Amazing Adventures, Gunsmoke Western, Journey into Mystery, Kid Cold Outlaw, Linda Carter Student Nurse, Love Romances, Millie the Model Comics, Strange Tales, Tales of Suspense, Tales to Astonish, Teenage Romance, and Fantastic Four #1. Now, can you imagine this workload? That was 12 titles. The same month, DC had 28 titles. No editor at DC was handling more than 7, and that was a team of Jack Schiff, Murray Boltinoff, and George Cashton, and they had other people writing them. People say, oh, Stan, he was just a PR guy. Oh, Stan, he really didn't do anything. I challenge you to match that workload.
And next up on the hit parade is Mr. Semper, who he's a behind-the-scenes guy, unless you're on Facebook, in which case you can't ever stop seeing John.
That's right, I'm everywhere.
John was everywhere, so John worked with Stan in the animation business numerous times.
Yeah, I'm probably best known for having produced Spider-Man the Animated Series 25 years ago. I would not be on this panel. My mother thanks you. I would not be on this panel of luminaries if it were not for Stan. I was the first time I met Stan. I was an Uber fan in the 1970s, and I paid $15 to go hear him lecture at Harvard. And it was one of the greatest nights of my life because it was right at the height of my loving Marvel comics. I had been reading them ever since I was in junior high. I started pretty much, with the first issues of everything. And so in the mid-'80s, I had made a bit of a name for myself in the TV animation business, and I was working for a company called Marvel Productions, which did nothing related to Marvel. I had no idea why they called it Marvel Productions, but the best thing about it was that in the back of the building, in the best office in the building, there was this guy named Stan Lee, whom I had worshipped. And these were kind of the dark days for Stan. You have to understand that in the 1980s, as far as television was concerned, and certainly as far as movies were concerned, they had no interest whatsoever in doing anything related to comic books. So we were not doing anything animated related to comic books. Every once in a while, there would be kind of a goofy Spider-Man show that would be done, but it really wasn't anything like a comic book. So I had really, I got to spend a tremendous amount of time with Stan. I told him that if I had known that I was going to spend this much time with him, I would not have spent my $15. I wanted my money back. Because, we got to know each other really, really well, and I wish that I had today's perspective then, because I would have spent even more time with him. And we're talking about lunches. I remember one time we went to lunch together, and as we were walking down the street, there was a truck, a delivery truck that just suddenly swerved over and screeched to a halt. And the guy who was driving it came leaping out. He had heard that Stan worked in the building. This was when we were in the New World building, actually. And he had hoped that one day he would meet Stan Lee, that he would see Stan Lee. And this was the day. And he came running over. He had his comic books ready. And he got them signed. And that was kind of the power of Stan, even during what I would call the dark days. But nothing was happening in animation with regard to comic books. And we used to dream of a day when that would be the case. So fast forward 10 years later, I got a call out of the clear blue that they were going to make a Spider-Man cartoon show. Actually, I had been at a party. I'm going to name drop. I had been at a party where James Cameron was there, and it was a party at Stan's house. And that was actually where they decided to do a Spider-Man cartoon show. Margaret Lesh was there as well, and she was the head of Fox Kids. Months later, I got a call from Stan out of the clear blue that he wanted me to do that show. And that was really, that was just a gift. Because I don't think I was Fox's #1 choice to do an action-adventure show. I was mostly known for comedy back then. I had just come up with doing Fraggle Rock for Jim Henson, animated. Thank you, but enough about me. Let's get back to Stan. And so I was mostly a comedy guy. So it was really Stan that just plucked me out of comedy. And he knew that I understood the value of Marvel Comics and that I was really his disciple. Everything I knew, I had learned from him. Everything I know about storytelling, I've learned from Stan. He was a great guy. He used to make me laugh all the time. I once said to him, you know, my friends are very excited about the fact that I'm working with you. He said, John, tell them I'm a shadowy figure. And you only catch glimpses of as I wander up the I said, sure, Stan, whatever you said. I'm going to go fast forward again. So we did Spider-Man. The great thing about doing Spider-Man was I got to recreate for all of you what I had gone through as a kid reading the comic book. And I got to do it with a heavy involvement from Stan. I think what isn't well known is that Stan had a lot to do with the first season. I can still go through scripts and pluck out the lines that he gave me, usually in a fit of pique. You know, he'd say, no! He says this, you know, and that's too long, make it shorter, and that sort of thing. But we had a great relationship working on the show. And I got to recreate what I had experienced when I was younger, through doing that show. But the very last conversation I had with Stan was on the phone. And it was maybe about, 6 months or so, maybe about a year before he passed away. And I said, Stan, how are you doing? And he said, well, John, he said, you know, the success of these movies, I know what the element is. It's me. Everyone's waiting for my cameo. They keep going to all the movies because they're waiting to see my cameo. So he had the Stan perspective on it. He was a great guy, a great human being, a hugely creative human being. And that can only be known by those of us who worked with him. And I miss him dearly. Thank you, John.
The man in the baseball cap at the end. Todd, I have a photo of your view with Stan at an important day. That was the, remember that? What was going on in that?
Yeah, so let me give you a couple of real facts here before I get to this photo here. My first meeting with Stan Lee, I've told this story before, I think it's worth repeating. I'm a 16-year-old boy with, at this point, soft hopes of maybe getting into comic books. I'm a Canadian kid. I'm in Florida on a baseball camp. I was an athlete. We're coming back. We're gonna have to stay overnight at a hotel, and then we fly out back to Canada. There's a sign, and it says comic book convention down the hall. A lot of comic book conventions like this. We went down the hall, and in one ballroom, that was the convention. I walked down, and there's a couple people there, and standing outside at his own table was Stan Lee. Now, at 16, I just started collecting comic books. The name Stan Lee was like the Pope to me, right? And here's why. No, it's true. Every comic book you bought from Marvel started with these words, Stan Lee presents. And in my mind, you just went, wow, he's touching all of these things. He's like this comic book god. He touches everything. So I sat there and went, wow, the Pope's here. There's other great with the hopes of it, I was always pestering people, asking them questions. And like I said to Stan over and over, you never remember his day, but it was so impactful. I asked him, I go, hey, Mr. Lee, do you mind, as he was signing, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And without hesitating, and this is the piece that I don't think you remember, without hesitating, he grabbed an empty chair and he put it right next to himself. And he said, here, sit right here, fire away. And he let me sit next to him for 6 hours that day. And he didn't act like he was being bothered, or at least I was too young to actually. And I just peppered him, and he gave me sort of advice, and it was one of the seminal moments of my career where I went back home as a Canadian kid, because you think everything's happening in New York and LA, you're never going to be able to touch it. And I went, wow, he said that we can do it. We're now basically letting people live in different places, and you can do it. So that was my meeting of him that he would never know. Fast forward, I became friends with him once I started doing Spider-Man, that he was a joy and encouraged me to do all the things that some of the editors at Marvel said stop doing, that he basically was saying keep going. But this photo right here, go back to that photo right there. Again, it's a big moment. I had the pleasure of introducing Stan Lee when he got his Hollywood Walk of Fame star, right? So, the reason it was such a big deal for me, and I think for our industry, is it was the first time they acknowledged somebody in our industry, comic books, right? He broke the barrier to say that we're worthy enough to be on the same stage as all of these names that we all work with. And so I had a relationship with Stan where, as he was getting older, his hearing was failing, and his eyesight was failing. And he goes, Todd, I can't really hear too well anymore, and I need somebody to be up on stage with me. So, can you come to this event? Can you come to this event? Can you come to this event? Because I can't hear what the fans are saying when they're asking questions. So, and I just need you to basically sort of reframe it, look to me so I can hear you, so they don't know that I can't hear. A couple years later, he got himself a hearing aid, goddammit. Right? But he was being a little vain at this point, because he was in his 80s, because it's like, how can I show him that at 80 I have to have a hearing aid? But I remember we did this one big thing. It was a Stan Lee, you guys know, you probably remember that, the Stan Lee panel. And I had to do this interpretation, this little kabuki dance. And he couldn't hear me, because the microphone was messing with him. So what was happening on this big giant stage was that I was over here at the podium asking the questions, and since he couldn't hear, within about 12 minutes he just started inching me at the podium. I'm looking at the camera that's projecting just like right here, and it's a blank stage. Because they don't have the camera on me. So I kept trying to say, Stan, you gotta get over there. There's nobody on camera, right? They're here for you, but I can't hear a damn thing, Todd. So I'm going, okay. Here's that moment, like I said, was special that he opened it up. There were a couple other times. All those times, let me just tell you, and to Marv's point, it is absolutely true, my experience. The Stan Lee on stage and off stage was the exact same man. It was not an act. Let me tell you that it was genuine. If any of you had the luck to be able to meet him, it was completely genuine. The other genius of this man, the superpower I've said of this man, is that in 30 seconds, because he knew he had 1,000 people online, in 30 seconds he can make you feel special. I saw him dozens and dozens of times sitting next to him, make that 30 seconds as important to that person as he could possibly do. because he knows if it didn't work, they would be dissatisfied. And then he had to do it again the next 30 seconds for the next person. And he did it with joy, right? So he got, I can tell you personally, he got as much joy out of you as you got out of him. We would sit in the back room, the green room, whatever, before we go on the stage, and he would say these things to me, especially near the end of his life. He'd go, Todd, can you believe this? Can you believe what's happening right now? All these people, look at the smiles. Isn't this great? Isn't this great? Who would have thunk it? Right? Who would have to ask him one question and he would just go, and that would be basically a shadow at that point. And he would say those things like, why is this ugly human being next to me? This guy's got no talent. Why am I spreading time here? So we had this little stick that we would do, and it was great fun. Like I said, I ended up doing it over and over and over with them, and we had a lot of good with it. The thing that I know that he had his perfect life was, he got to go to these conventions with joy. You guys gave him joy, and then at the end, he was kind of a private guy, I think, and then he would go home to his wife, right? And then, unfortunately, his wife died, right before the 70th anniversary. And for me, I could see the difference. And if there was an autopsy on Stanley, I think he died in a broken heart. He would say to me near the end, I wish I could be with Joni. I wish I could be with Joni. I can't see, I can't hear, my wife's not here, I wish I could be with Joni. So, because the two things he wanted to do was to go to the shows, he couldn't anymore. He couldn't, I had the honor to be on the stage with him the very last time he was ever on stage in Phoenix, Arizona. And he lost that because he couldn't hear and see, it was gone. The conventions were taken away, and his wife was taken away. And that was the moment that I just went, this man that was full of joy, I went, oh, and I wanted to encourage him to go and to keep going, because I thought he'd go to 110, right? We all did. But I'll give you the moment he surprised me the most. I was in the trailer with him one time, and we were having a conversation, and he would regale you with stories. The great thing about living to be 90 is that you have hundreds of great stories, right? Every one of his 1 hour panel could have gone 4. So I'll ask him throw a couple questions and he would tell me the story. And I was sitting with him one time, I hope I found a lot of kids here, because he was a gentleman. And he'd go, Tom, have I ever told you what I think the greatest word in the world is? The most useful, most valuable word in the world is? No, I don't think so. It's fuck. I had the same reaction. I sat there, and he went, let me tell you, now he's like a professor who actually went into a thesis of this word. It is the most useful word. It can be a noun, and he gave me some examples. It can be a pronoun. It can be an example. It can be attached to something, and he went through all the examples using the word, and I went, wow. He's like, but I can't say it in front of the 8-year-old children. I said, okay, someday I will share this gift of that word to the world. But that was it. Like I said, I had a 30-year relationship with them, probably shorter than a lot of people up here, but I was here near the end. I think I was one of the few that was able to get access to him at the end, right? Because silly stuff was happening, and a lot of people didn't have access. So I had access to him. I just wanted to make sure that he was there. And I wrote in one of the last times I saw him, just before he died, that it was that what struck me at that moment was I was looking at a 94-year-old man. And up to that moment, I had never given him the grace to be old. I don't think most of us in this room. He was just the bunny that was every bunny that was going to go on and on and on. And why? Because he did it up till 93. I was on stage with him. He had this power in him up to 93. They go, wow, when I'm 60, if I have half that, I will be joyful. And he just gave us this false hope that he was going to go forever. And what he didn't get to do was to just say, he's 94, right? And so at the end, it was a great, and here's the thing that I marvel too, and then I'll give it to somebody else. Who's the guy that starts their acting career at 88. And so to John's point, he was quite proud of those cameos. And not only was he proud of them, thinking that you came just for him, he actually thought the Academy Award should have had a cameo in the movie. For the last 10 years non-stop. It was a bit of a head scratcher for him. So he just liked to go out there and do all that, and like I said, has sort of his Robin to his Batman, to use a bad example to the competition. That I was there sort of as a 16-year-old kid, and I was there close to the time he took his last breath. But the guy was gracious, he was kind, he was a gentleman, and some of the criticism that I've heard from time to time from people who are trying to defend the artists that work for him, here's my perspective as an artist. He just had the unfortunate fate of outliving those gentlemen. And so had Jack Kirby and Dick Ayers and Don Heck and all these giants of our industry, Gil Kane, John Buscema, as they all passed away before our eyes, one of the last people that could tell some of those stories was Stan. And as he told those stories, there were times where a misconception that he was hogging the limelight. I never heard him say me. I heard him always say we, us, this. When I was on stage, he was always giving him credit. He's just the last person to tell the story, and people at times misinterpreted that he was hogging it. He didn't ask for everybody to say it. He doesn't have the authority when people introduce him up on stage or at a show to say, the guy who created all of this, as much as he may have said, I co-created. The media will just give as much of a hype line as possible. We all know that. Sometimes to our advantage, sometimes to our disadvantage. So he didn't put those labels on himself because I was with him dozens and dozens of times where he disavowed them. So I love the man. He was like a father to me. And there are moments now, it's past, where I see some of those pictures and I go, oh, I don't get to go on stage with them again, right? The joy we have is now, and I'm just going to have to put it in my mind. We all have the story, we all have it here. And like you, we just miss him. We just miss him to death. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Todd. I did a lot of panels with Stan, especially on the Wizard World tour, as you can see here. I'm not getting a lot of words in edgewise. Very to listen to Stan. On one of the shows, he had missed coming a day late and had a bad reaction to a flu shot, so he wasn't feeling well. He was kind of, just kind of walking very slowly and pulling himself up the stairs. Of course, when we got on stage, he lit up with the president of the company and said, Stan's only going to do 20 minutes. Not a full panel. So you'll understand. And we get to 20 minutes, people flash me signs, and I say to Stan, well, as John explained, you're only doing a half-length panel, so do you have anything you want to say to the folks before we go? And Stan says to me, is God talking to you? And he say we have to stop? I feel great, let's keep going. Everybody from Stan's handlers and Wizard, they're flashing me signs, and I have no idea what the hell they want me to do. So that was Stan. And in the Stan tradition, I am writing a biography of him that's coming out in the fall. It's unauthorized, and he said, I'm not doing any interviews. Cut to 2 interviews later that he did for the book. And I hope you guys like it, and I have a cameo of sorts that I want to close this with, if I can make the technology work. There it is. When Al Jaffe of Mad Magazine turned 95, Al is now 98. When he turned 95, and he and Stan, as you know, worked together on Ziggy Pig and Silly Seal. So I asked Stan to, why don't you anyway, I asked Stan if I did a video for Al, and he was more than thrilled to do it, and here it is. So we kind of end with a Stanley cameo of sorts.
Thank you.
Hey, Al, I heard it was your 95th birthday. I can't believe it. It seems to me we were both a couple of kids when we were doing Silly Seal and Ziggy Pig. Silly Seal and Ziggy Pig. You know, those two characters have gained immortality. You walk up to anybody in the street and you say, Silly Seal and Ziggy Pig, and they immediately say, Al Jaffe and Stanley. And if you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Nobody may remember them, but damn it, I thought they were great, and you did the most terrific job. Of course, you also did a lot of other stuff at Marvel. If I had a memory, I'd remember it. I'm a little annoyed that you're older than I am. I thought I held the record, but you can't win them all. Anyway, I want you to be sure to have the happiest birthday. I want you to know that you were one of the cleverest, nicest guys who ever worked at Marvel. How we lost you to Mad, I'll never know, but you can't win them all. And maybe someday I'll get to New York and see you, or you'll come out here and see me. That wouldn't be bad. I think I still remember what you look like. I have no idea what the hell I look like. I don't know. It's too discouraging. But enjoy your 95th birthday. I suppose when you're 96, I'll have to, Fingeroth will let me know and I'll have to send you another video. When you're 97, I'll have to send you another one. Jesus Christ. I should have written a speech that would have been clever instead of trying to ad-lib, and I feel like an idiot, so I'm going to sign up now before you tell people, boy, we thought that Stan had some talent. You should hear the dumb video he sent. I listened to the whole thing, thinking maybe there'll be something worth listening to as he goes along, but it kept getting worse. Anyway, happy birthday, Al, and all the best, and I really mean that. Excelsior.
Thank you to this wonderful crew. What a great event.